December 23rd, 1944, 07:32 hours. Bastogne, Belgium, 23 degrees below zero. Sergeant Daniel Harlow lay motionless in a frozen foxhole, his modified M1, Garand pressed tight against his shoulder. Blood had crusted on his trigger finger from 3 days of modifications. His right shoulder showed a purple-black bruise from endless testing. The cold metal burned through his gloves. Through his scope magnification, he shouldn't possess it. Danny watched the German advance. 15 Panzer tanks crawling forward like steel beetles across the snow. Behind them, 180 infantry in Feldgrau uniforms, their breath visible in the Arctic air. 850 yards distant and closing. But Danny wasn't watching the tanks. He was watching 3 specific faces. 3 American soldiers huddled in foxholes 1,200 yards away, unaware they had 15 minutes left to live. Private Bobby Chen, 19 years old, San Francisco. Through the scope, Danny could see Bobby writing in a small notebook. Letter number 52 to his parents. Mom, Dad, I'll be home by spring. The war's almost over. Bobby's hand moved steadily across the page, his breath frosting in the air. He had no idea German artillery was already calculating coordinates for his exact position. Corporal Jimmy Patterson, 22, Knoxville, Tennessee. The medic crouched near the collapsed barn that served as their aid station. Danny watched Jimmy check his supplies by flashlight. 1 morphine syringe left. 3 wounded men in his sector, all in pain. Jimmy's hands shook slightly as he organized bandages. 12 soldiers had died in the past week. 3 of them from wounds that better supplies could have treated. Jimmy blamed himself for every death. Lieutenant Frank Mitchell, 27, Boston. The artillery forward observer occupied a shallow trench radio handset pressed to his ear. Danny saw Frank pull a photograph from inside his jacket. Even at this distance, Danny knew what it showed. Catherine Mitchell, 8 months pregnant, hand resting on her belly. Due date February 12, 1945, 51 days away. Frank kissed the photo before tucking it back against his heart. Danny's radio crackled to life. Captain William Harrison's voice strained but trying to project confidence. All units hold position. Do not engage. Wait for battalion support. Over. Danny's hands tightened around his rifle. The trigger beneath his finger was no longer standard Army issue. He had spent 3 nights modifying it, reducing the reset travel from 7/8 of an inch to barely 1 in way to 1/8. A hair trigger with rapid reset, allowing him to fire at twice the normal rate, maybe more. It was forbidden by regulations. Article 108 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, destruction of government property. Maximum penalty, 5 years hard labor. In a combat zone with an unauthorized weapon modification, a firing squad was possible. Staff Sergeant Eddie Martinez lay beside him, binoculars pressed to his face, tracking the German advance. Eddie's voice came out as a whisper. Clockwork, they'll hang you for this. Danny closed his eyes. Thought of Tommy Breslin. Thought of 2 little girls in Boston who would never know their father. Thought of Annie and Rose, ages 6 and 4, whose daddy had died because his rifle jammed at the wrong moment. But Bobby, Jimmy, and Frank are going to live. Danny opened his eyes. Through the scope, he found his first target. A German Oberst, a colonel standing in the turret of the lead panzer. The man had binoculars raised, surveying the American lines with the confidence of someone who believed he was beyond rifle range. He was wrong. Standard M1 Garand, effective range 500 yards maximum. Danny's modified rifle, 800 yards. Maybe more. Nobody knew. Not Eddie. Not Captain Harrison. Not the Germans who thought they were safe at this distance. 847 yards. Wind 4 to 6 miles per hour left to right. Temperature affecting ballistics minimally at this range. Slight downward angle approximately 8 degrees from his elevated position. Danny calculated holdover. 12 inches high, 3 inches right. He exhaled halfway. His finger touched the modified trigger. The metal was so cold it burned. 1 pound of pressure, 2 pounds, 3. The rifle cracked. The sound was different. Danny had attached an echo deflector to the muzzle, a cone-shaped device made from a ration tin. It changed the sound signature, made the shot seem to come from multiple directions at once. Basic physics turned into tactical advantage. 847 yards away, through the scope's magnification, Danny watched the German colonel's head snap backward. The man's body slumped forward into the turret, binoculars falling from lifeless hands. The German soldiers froze, confused. Where had the shot come from? How they were beyond American rifle range, impossible. But Danny's finger was already moving. The modified trigger reset instantly. Not the long pull of a standard Garand, just a slight release, and it was ready again. 2.1 seconds after the first shot, Danny fired again. A German radio operator, heavy backpack, and antenna marking him clearly went down. 1.9 seconds later, third shot. A second radio operator collapsed. Fourth shot. A German major gesturing frantically to his men. Down. Fifth shot. Machine gun team leader, distinctive profile. Down. Sixth shot. Anti-tank crew setting up their weapon. Down. Total elapsed time, 8.3 seconds. 6 shots, 6 kills. The rate of fire was impossible for a standard M1 Garand. Army specifications, 30 rounds per minute, maximum roughly 2-second intervals between shots. Danny had just fired 6 rounds in 8.3 seconds, over 43 rounds per minute effective rate. The German formation exploded into chaos. Infantry dove for cover, their neat ranks disintegrating. Officers shouted, pointing in 3 different directions. The echo deflector was working perfectly. They had no idea where the fire was coming from. Tanks halted, their commanders suddenly uncertain. Without clear infantry support and unable to identify the threat, they were vulnerable. Eddie lowered his binoculars, his voice barely audible. Jesus Christ, clockwork. They think they're facing an entire machine gun platoon. Danny didn't respond. He was already lining up his 7th shot. A German officer was trying to rally his troops, waving his arms pointing toward the American lines. The rifle cracked again, 2.2 seconds after the 6th shot. The officer crumpled. 8th shot. A German artillery spotter, radio handset visible. Down. 9th shot. A company commander, rank insignia, clear even at this distance. Down. The German advance had completely stalled. What had been a disciplined assault was now confusion and retreat. Battalion-level coordination was collapsing. With their senior officers dead and radio communications severed, individual companies were isolated. Junior officers hesitated, uncertain of objectives, unable to coordinate with adjacent units. The tanks began withdrawing to the tree line. They needed to regroup, reassess the threat. One sergeant with a 75-cent modification and a watch spring had just stopped a German armored assault. Eddie keyed the radio, his voice shaking slightly. Watchdog 3 to Eagle Nest. Enemy forces withdrawing to original positions. Estimate delay of at least 30 minutes, possibly more. Over. There was no response. Danny had disabled the radio after sending Private Walsh back to headquarters. When Captain Harrison realized what Danny was doing, he would order them to cease fire. Can't obey orders you don't receive. Eddie looked at Danny, understanding and fear mixing in his expression. Command's going to know. They'll hear this rate of fire. They'll know you modified that rifle. Danny chambered another round, his movements automatic after years of practice. Let them hang me. Bobby, Jimmy, and Frank are going to live. He raised the scope again. German soldiers were examining the ground where his bullets had struck, trying to calculate the angle. Feldgendarmerie military police with training in battlefield forensics. They would figure out his position eventually. Then the artillery would come. How many rounds you got left? Eddie asked. Danny checked. 165. Enough. They're going to figure out where we are. Artillery incoming. Then we move after the next burst. Danny had bought 15 minutes, maybe 20. Enough time for Bobby to relocate his position before the German artillery found his range. Enough time for Jimmy to move the wounded. Enough time for Frank to adjust his own artillery fires. Enough time for 3 men to stay alive. But what Danny didn't know, what he couldn't see through his scope, was that the device that saved them would cost him everything. 25 years of silence. A career destroyed. Recognition delayed so long it came 59 years too late, long after he was dead. And it all started in a small town in Ohio with a boy who could fix anything broken. To understand how Danny created this impossible weapon, we need to go back. Ashford, Ohio, 1930. Population 847. A town so small it barely appeared on maps. Danny Harlow was born April 12, 1922, the third of 5 children. His father, William, worked in the coal mines. 12-hour shifts in darkness, lungs slowly filling with black dust. His mother, Margaret, kept their small farm alive, raising chickens and vegetables, stretching every penny until it screamed. The Depression hit Ashford like a hammer. The mine cut shifts. Half the town was out of work. The Harlow family survived on what they could grow and what William could earn 3 days a week underground. But even in poverty, young Danny showed something unusual, a gift for understanding how things worked. More than that, a gift for seeing how things should work. Spring 1932. Danny was 10 years old. Margaret found him in William's tool shed, his father's prized pocket watch disassembled on the workbench. 53 tiny parts spread across the scarred wood like the components of a mechanical heart. Daniel William Harlow. Her voice could have stripped paint. Your father will tan your hide. But Danny was already reassembling it, his small fingers moving with surprising precision. He didn't look up, focused entirely on his work. Mainspring was wound too tight, Mama. Watch runs fast. Gains 5 minutes every day. I loosened the tension 3/4 turns. Added sewing machine oil to the escapement wheel. It'll keep better time now. William came home to find his watch in pieces and his wife furious. But when Danny finished the reassembly and the watch proved accurate, gaining neither time nor losing it, William's anger faded to grudging respect. Harold Morrison, the gunsmith from the next town over, happened to be visiting that evening. He examined the watch carefully, holding it to his ear, checking its accuracy against his own timepiece. That boy didn't fix your watch, William, Morrison said slowly. He improved it, changed how it works. He sees what things should be, not just what they are. Fall 1934, Danny was 12. Uncle Thomas returned from a hunting trip, rifle in hand, face dark with frustration. The firing pin had sheared off. A clean break, the kind that meant the rifle was done until a replacement part could be ordered from Columbus. 3 weeks minimum. The adults discussed it over dinner. Danny listened, saying nothing, his mind already working. What if I don't replace it? He asked suddenly. What if I make it work better? The adults looked at him. William started to object, but Margaret touched his arm. Let the boy try. Danny spent 3 days in the shed. He took Mother's sewing needles, the finest steel in the house, filed them down, shaped them, tempered them in the coal forge until the metal had the right flexibility and strength. Then he created a new firing pin from salvaged steel. But he didn't just replace the broken part. He redesigned the geometry, changed the angle so it wouldn't shear again under stress. Uncle Thomas tested it the following weekend. The rifle functioned perfectly. Better than before. Harold Morrison examined this repair too. He turned the rifle over in his hands, worked the action, studied Danny's modification. He did it again, Morrison told William. Didn't just fix it, made it better. You got a special boy there, William. Question is whether the world's ready for him. Summer 1936. Danny was 14. He was helping his father at the shooting range. William taught occasional classes to earn extra money, teaching local men and boys how to shoot safely. One student, a farmer named Henderson, had an old rifle with a trigger pull so heavy it required 8 pounds of pressure. The man's hands shook with the effort, ruining his aim. Can't afford a better rifle, Henderson said, frustrated after missing another target. Danny asked to examine it. He worked the action, felt the trigger, understood the problem immediately. Don't need a better rifle, need a better trigger. That night, Danny filed the sear surfaces, polished the contact points, adjusted the spring tension. He reduced the trigger pull from 8 pounds to 4.5. Smooth, predictable, controllable. Henderson's next shooting session was different. His shots grouped tight, his hands steady. He bought Danny lunch as thanks. William watched his son work on that trigger. Watched the careful precision, the intuitive understanding of mechanical systems, the ability to see problems and solutions simultaneously. Danny, you got a gift for making things work right, William said. Army's gonna love you or hate you, probably both. At Ashford High School, Danny struggled. Math teacher Mr. Harrison noted in his records, Daniel can calculate trajectories and angles instantly when building something, but stares blankly at equations on chalkboard. His mind works in pictures, not numbers. Shop class stray days. Every project perfect, often improved beyond the original specifications. English history, mathematics C's and D's. Danny could build anything, fix anything, improve anything. But he couldn't explain how he did it. The knowledge lived in his hands, not in words. December 7th, 1941, Danny's senior year, Sunday afternoon, the family gathered around the radio after church. The announcer's voice tight with shock. We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, by air President Roosevelt has just announced. The room went silent except for the radio static. Within 8 weeks, Danny and 7 of his classmates walked into the Army recruitment office in the county seat. Danny was 19 years old, 5 months from graduation. Margaret cried. William shook his hand, his coal-blackened fingers gripping tight. Make us proud, son, and don't go changing things that work fine. Danny looked at his father, thought about the watch, the rifle, the trigger. Sometimes things that work fine don't work well enough, Dad. He had no idea how true those words would prove. Fort Benning, Georgia, March 1942. The heat was like nothing Danny had experienced in Ohio. Sweat soaked through his uniform before morning formation ended. The red clay dust got into everything, clogged weapons, irritated eyes and throats. Third day at the firing range, Danny outshot every recruit in his company. Then he outshot 2 of the instructors. Drill Sergeant Marcus Cooper watched through binoculars, his expression unreadable. After the final target count, he approached Danny. How'd you learn to shoot like that, recruit? Danny shrugged, uncomfortable with attention. It's just angles and timing, Sergeant. Like fixing a clock. Something changed in Cooper's face. A slight smile, not entirely friendly. From now on, you're clockwork. In clockwork, you will not modify Army property. Am I clear? Yes, Sergeant. But modifications came anyway. Danny couldn't help himself. When he saw something that could work better, his hands itched to fix it. First Offense adjusted his rifle sights. They were misaligned by 2 degrees, Sergeant. Second Offense modified his backpack straps to distribute weight more efficiently. Standard Issue causes spine compression. Sergeant. Third Offense filed down parts of his rifle's trigger assembly. Creates smoother action, reduces pull weight, Sergeant. Each offense earned punishment. Extra duties, push-ups, kitchen patrol, stern warnings about tampering with Army property. Staff Sergeant Frank Reynolds pulled him aside after the 3rd incident. Harlow, the Army spent millions of dollars designing that rifle. Teams of engineers, years of testing. What makes you think you know better than them? Danny met his eyes, his response quiet but firm. I don't think I know better, Sergeant. I just see what it could be. But despite the disciplinary issues, Danny's shooting scores were impossible to ignore. Consistently hit targets at 800 yards, well beyond the Garand's official effective range of 500. His groups were tight enough that instructors initially thought the targets were mislabeled. By June 1943, Private First Class Daniel Harlow was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division as a designated marksman. The 101st, nicknamed the Screaming Eagles, was an elite unit, created specifically for parachuting behind enemy lines. The men were tight-knit, having trained together for months. Danny was an outsider, quiet, thoughtful, always tinkering with equipment. Here comes clockwork, soldiers would mutter, about to break something else. But Danny's modifications would remain harmless, tinkering and oddity, tolerated because of his shooting ability, until one morning in Normandy. Until equipment failure cost a man his life. Until Danny decided never again. June 6, 1944. The 0 went 30 hours. The C-47 transport shook with flak as it crossed the French coast. Danny sat strapped into his seat parachute pack, digging into his back rifle secured across his chest. Around him, other paratroopers of the 101st Airborne sat in similar positions, faces painted with camouflage, eyes wide with fear and adrenaline. Operation Overlord. D-Day. The invasion of Europe. The green light flashed. The jumpmaster shouted. Danny stood, moved to the door, and jumped into darkness. The chaos was immediate. Tracers arced through the night sky. Explosions lit the ground below. The wind caught his parachute and dragged him off course. He landed hard in a field 3.2 miles from his designated drop zone, rolled, gathered his chute, and found himself completely alone. For 18 hours, Danny navigated through enemy-controlled territory using the stars and his compass, avoiding German patrols, working his way toward where the 101st should be. During that journey, he met another separated soldier, Private Thomas Breslin, Boston, 24 years old. 2 daughters, Annie, 6 years old, and Rose, 4. Tommy carried their photograph in his helmet tucked into the webbing. He updated it every month when new photos arrived from home. That morning, crouched in a ditch, while a German patrol passed 50 yards away, Tommy showed Danny the latest picture. 2 little girls in matching dresses, gap-toothed smiles, holding hands in front of a white house. Look how big they're getting, Tommy whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Annie lost her first tooth last month. Rose starts school this fall. Tommy talked about his daughters constantly as they moved through the French countryside. About Annie's love of books, how she wanted to be a teacher. About Rose's fascination with nursing, how she bandaged her dolls with scraps of cloth. 17 days until rotation, Tommy said as they approached American lines. Then home for Christmas. Promised Annie I'd take her ice skating on Boston Common. She's been practicing all year. They were close to safety. Forward scouts had cleared this area hours earlier. Both men were exhausted, relieved. Then Tommy's rifle jammed. A standard M1 Garand malfunction. The extractor failed common in dusty conditions. Tommy tried clearing it, tapping the bolt, his hands moving automatically through the drill. From the tree line 30 yards away, a German soldier with an MP-40 submachine gun opened fire. The burst caught Tommy in the leg. Femoral artery. The blood spray was arterial, pulsing bright red against his uniform. Danny ran, pressed his hands to the wound. Blood pumped through his fingers, hot, unstoppable, soaking his sleeves, pooling in the dirt beneath him. "Medic!" Danny shouted. "Medic!" No response. They were alone. Tommy's face went white, shock setting in body, recognizing what the mind refused to accept. His hands grabbed Danny's jacket, fingers digging in, eyes unfocused. "Tell my girls." He couldn't finish the sentence. His grip loosened. His eyes stared at nothing. Danny held pressure on the wound for another minute. Pointless. Nobody survives a severed femoral artery without immediate surgical intervention. Not in a field in France. Not with the nearest aid station 2 miles away. Private Thomas Breslin died at 1851 hours, June 6, 1944, 17 days before his rotation. Annie and Rose would grow up without their father, would struggle through school without his help, would walk down wedding aisles alone someday, would tell their own children about the grandfather they never knew, all because a rifle jammed at the wrong moment. An American patrol found Danny at 1920 hours, still sitting beside Tommy's body, hands covered in dried blood. That night, 2200 hours at the American bivouac, Danny sat alone. He had tried washing Tommy's blood from his hands. It wouldn't come off completely. Under his fingernails, in the creases of his knuckles, a permanent stain. Staff Sergeant Eddie Martinez approached, carrying 2 canteen cups of coffee. "You okay, Clockwork?" Danny didn't look up. His voice was flat, emotionless, the shock giving way to something harder. His rifle jammed, standard malfunction, extractor failure. If the extractor had been filed down slightly different angle, it wouldn't jam in dusty conditions. Tommy would be alive. Annie and Rose would have their father. You can't fix every rifle in the Army. "I can fix mine." Danny finally looked up, his eyes hard. "And I will. No more Marines die because equipment that works fine doesn't work well enough. You're going to get court-martialed. Then they can hang me, but nobody else dies like Tommy. Not on my watch. No more Annie and Rose Breslins." What Danny modified that night, working by flashlight in a supply tent, would remain secret for 25 years. But first he had to survive Normandy, Holland, and the frozen hell of Bastogne. June through December 1944. 6 months of war. Danny spent every spare moment working on his rifle. Secretly, carefully, using whatever materials he could scavenge or trade for. A broken wristwatch from a soldier who didn't need it anymore. Needle files stolen from a motor pool. Springs salvaged from damaged equipment. The modifications came in stages, each one tested privately, each one pushing the boundaries of what regulations allowed. Modification number 1 came in June, just days after Tommy's death. The trigger assembly. Danny reduced the reset travel from 7/8 of an inch to 1/8. He used the watch spring, cutting it to precise length, adjusting the tension until the trigger would reset with barely perceptible forward movement. 3 nights of work, hands bleeding from the sharp metal edges, eyes burning from working by dim flashlight. The result, a trigger that could be bumped rapidly in succession. 40 rounds per minute instead of the standard 30. Maybe more if he pushed it. Modification number 2 came in August after the breakout from Normandy. The Echo deflector. Danny fashioned it from a ration tin, cutting and shaping the metal into a cone that fit over his muzzle. The physics were simple. Sound waves reflected off the internal surfaces at angles, creating echoes that made a single rifle sound like fire coming from multiple positions. Basic science turned into tactical deception. Modification number 3 came in October during the push through France. Barrel bedding adjustment. Danny free-floated the barrel, eliminating pressure points that affected accuracy. The modification gained him approximately 50 yards of effective range. Small improvement, but in combat, 50 yards could mean the difference between life and death. Nobody knew. Danny fired normally during combat, conserving the modified capability for critical moments. The rapid trigger reset the extended range, the echo effect. All hidden, all forbidden, all potentially life-saving. September 1944, Operation Market Guard in the Netherlands. Danny's squad was pinned down by a German machine gun nest. 7 men trapped in a drainage ditch, unable to advance or retreat. The machine gun had perfect fields of fire, sweeping back and forth, kicking up dirt and water every time someone moved. Danny used his modified trigger for the first time in sustained combat. 7 shots in 3.8 seconds. An impossible rate of fire. The machine gun crew never understood what hit them. 7 Germans dead before they could traverse their weapon. The gun went silent. Danny's squad survived. Staff Sergeant Thomas Burke, the squad leader, approached afterward. His face was confused, suspicious. "How the hell did you fire that fast clockwork?" Danny kept his expression neutral. "Adrenaline, Sarge. You know how it is." Burke studied him for a long moment. He wasn't stupid. He knew something was different. But his squad was alive. "I still don't approve of whatever you're doing," Burke said finally. "But I can't argue with results." December 1944, France. Recovery period after Market Garden. The 101st Airborne was pulled back from the line for rest and refit. Light duties, hot meals, time to write letters home. Many soldiers thought the war would be over by Christmas. Germany was collapsing. Everyone could feel it. During this time, Danny befriended 3 soldiers who would become more than just fellow paratroopers. They would become his reason for what came next. Private Robert Chen, 19 years old, San Francisco, California. Bobby was the youngest man in Charlie Company. Fresh-faced, always smiling, writing letters home every single day. His parents ran a small restaurant in Chinatown. Bobby wrote about the food he missed, the streets he walked as a kid, the life he would return to when the war ended. Letter number 47, which Danny read over Bobby's shoulder one evening. "Mom, Dad, I'm safe. The war will be over soon. I'll be home by spring. We'll work together in the restaurant just like before. I miss your dumplings. I miss everything." Bobby folded each letter carefully, numbered them sequentially, kept them in a small notebook in his jacket pocket. A chronological record of survival. Corporal James Patterson, 22 years old, Knoxville, Tennessee. Jimmy was the company medic, quiet, serious, carrying the weight of every soldier he couldn't save. 12 men had died under his care in the past 3 months. 3 of them from wounds that better supplies could have treated. Insufficient morphine, not enough plasma, bandages running low. Jimmy had started rationing obsessively. 1 morphine syringe left 3 wounded men who need it. Who gets it? Who suffers? The mathematics of triage haunted him. Danny found Jimmy one night sitting alone, staring at his medical supplies. "Can't save everyone," Danny said quietly. "Could save more with better equipment." Jimmy's voice was bitter. "We're the richest country in the world, and I'm rationing morphine like it's gold." Danny understood that bitterness. Equipment failures, supply failures, men dying because of bureaucracy and logistics. Lieutenant Frank Mitchell, 27 years old, Boston, Massachusetts. Frank was an artillery forward observer responsible for calling in fire missions, coordinating indirect fire support. Dangerous job. German counter-battery fire always targeted observers first. Blind the artillery, win the battle. Frank had married 3 months before deployment. His wife, Catherine, was 8 months pregnant now, due in February. Frank carried her photograph everywhere, pulled it out constantly, talked about the baby endlessly. "Going to name him William if it's a boy," Frank said one evening, showing Danny the photo for probably the 20th time. "Catherine Jr. if it's a girl. 51 days until I'm a father. 51 days." Danny watched Frank count down. The days watched him kiss the photograph before every patrol, watched him check it obsessively to make sure it hadn't been damaged. These 3 men. Bobby writing his letters, Jimmy rationing his supplies, Frank counting down to fatherhood. They became Danny's squad, his friends, his brothers. They became the faces that made the abstract mathematics of war unbearably real. December 16th, 1945, 30 hours. The 101st was still in rest when the alert came. Emergency deployment. Battle of the Bulge. Hitler had launched a massive surprise offensive through the Ardennes forest. Over 200,000 German troops, more than 1,000 tanks, punching through the American lines. The strategic objective was Bastogne, Belgium, a small town that sat at the junction of 7 major roads. Control Bastogne, control the roads. Control the roads or reach Antwerp and split the Allied armies in half. The 101st Airborne loaded into open trucks in the freezing pre-dawn darkness. No time for proper cold weather gear. Many soldiers still wore the lighter uniforms from their previous deployment. The temperature was 10 degrees below zero and dropping. They arrived in Bastogne on December 19th, just as the German forces were completing their encirclement. The situation was immediately, obviously, terrifyingly dire. American forces, approximately 11,000 men, combination of the 101st Airborne and elements of the 10th Armored Division. Scattered artillery units. Various support troops pressed into infantry roles. German forces 45,000 troops, over 400 tanks, massive artillery support. 3-to-1 numerical advantage, 4-to-1 in armor, and they had the 101st surrounded. Supplies were critically low, ammunition rationed, medical supplies insufficient, food running short. The weather had closed in heavy snow and fog, preventing air resupply or support. The temperature continued dropping, 20 degrees below zero, then 25 below. Men were getting frostbite as fast as they were getting wounded. Weapons froze. Batteries died. Vehicle engines wouldn't start. Within 24 hours of arrival, the 101st Airborne was completely surrounded. The German perimeter stretched nearly 30 miles around the town. Every road out was cut. They were trapped. December 22nd, 0900 hours. German emissaries approached the American lines under a flag of truce. They carried a surrender ultimatum for Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, the acting commander of the 101st. The German message was formal, professional, threatening. Surrender now or face annihilation. You are surrounded. Your situation is hopeless. Lay down your arms. McAuliffe's response became famous. One word, 4 letters. Nuts. The Germans didn't understand the American slang. The message had to be explained. It means go to hell. We're not surrendering. The German high command was furious. They ordered an all-out assault. Northwest sector identified as the weakest point in the American perimeter. The 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment held a 3-mile stretch with less than 70% combat strength. 117 effective soldiers defending a line that should require 400. Danny's squad was assigned to a forward observation post 1 mile northwest of Bastogne Center, a small wooded rise with clear views of the likely German approach route. Perfect position for watching. Suicide position for fighting. With Danny Eddie Martinez as spotter, David Walsh as radio operator. Their orders were explicit, clear, unambiguous. Observe enemy movements and report. Do not engage unless directly attacked. Conserve ammunition. But Danny spent that afternoon watching through his binoculars, watching German preparations, watching officers gather around maps, watching artillery crews position their guns, watching tanks refuel and prepare, and most importantly, watching the American foxholes 1,200 yards away where Bobby Chen, Jimmy Patterson, and Frank Mitchell were preparing to die. December 22nd, 2200 hours. Danny's observation post. Danny sat in frozen darkness, his M1 Garand partially disassembled before him. Small penlight clenched in his teeth, hands numb despite gloves. His breath came out in white clouds that dissipated slowly in the still air. Eddie watched from the foxhole entrance, confused and concerned. Clockwork. What are you doing? The rifle's already modified. Not enough. Danny's voice was muffled around the penlight. Tomorrow's assault will be massive. The trigger needs to handle extended rapid fire without failing. It's been working fine. Danny looked up, his eyes hard. Fine isn't enough. Not for what's coming. What Danny was about to attempt was dangerous even by his standards. The modifications he had already made pushed the boundaries of safety and reliability. What he planned next could make the rifle completely unreliable, or it could save 300 lives. If the modification failed during battle, men would die. If it succeeded, the army would hang him. Danny had done the mathematics, the brutal, unforgiving mathematics of warfare. German assault force based on intelligence estimates, 1,000 infantry, 20 tanks. Concentrated on a 2-mile front. Primary objective, break through the northwest perimeter, penetrate Bastogne's defenses, secure the road junction. American defenders in Bobby, Jimmy, and Frank's Section 117 combat effective soldiers, 250 caliber machine guns, 3 bazooka teams with 7 rockets total. Each rifleman carrying an average of 65 rounds of ammunition. Time until German attack approximately 8 to 10 hours. Time for reinforcement to arrive 48 to 72 hours minimum. General Patton's Third Army was fighting its way north from the south, but they were still days away. The conclusion was simple and terrible. The northwest perimeter would be overrun. Bobby would die. Jimmy would die. Frank would die, unless something disrupted the German attack coordination, unless something forced them to hesitate, to recalculate, to delay. Danny's modified trigger could already fire 40 rounds per minute, but for an extended engagement potentially lasting hours, he needed more. Increased durability, faster reset, absolute reliability in 25-degree below zero cold. The work began. Step 1, further reduce the disconnector engagement. Danny filed the surfaces another 30% thinner. The risk was significant. File too much, and the trigger wouldn't catch at all, causing dangerous uncontrolled firing. File too little, and the improvement would be negligible. Danny worked by feel as much as measurement. His fingers had learned mechanical tolerances through years of practice. The metal rasped softly under his file, tiny curls of steel falling away. Step 2, install a second watch spring. Danny had traded for another broken wristwatch 2 days earlier, sensing somehow that he would need it. The dual spring system provided redundancy. If the primary spring failed, the secondary would maintain function. Step 3, polish all contact surfaces with ultra-fine compound. Danny had made this himself, crushing stone to powder and mixing it with gun oil. He worked the paste into every contact point, reducing friction by an estimated 60%. Eddie watched the process, his expression growing more worried. "That watch spring," he said suddenly. "Is that like the one from the story you told me? Your father's pocket watch when you were 10? Danny paused, looked at the tiny coil of metal in his fingers, smiled grimly. "Same principle. Make something work better than it was designed to. Guess I've been doing this my whole life." "The Army's going to hang you clockwork." "Maybe." Danny resumed his work, not looking up. "But Tommy Breslin's daughters won't get 300 more letters saying we regret to inform you. Annie and Rose have to be enough. I won't make more." Step 4, test in extreme cold. Danny placed the trigger assembly in the snow outside the foxhole, let the metal reach ambient temperature. -23 degrees. Cold enough to make steel brittle, to change its properties, to cause unexpected failures. He brought it back inside, reassembled the rifle, tested the dry fire repeatedly. The trigger functioned perfectly. The reset was instantaneous, barely perceptible. Pull, release, slightly, pull again. Fast as his finger could move. Step 5, refinish the echo deflector. Danny had brought it with him, the cone-shaped tin device that changed his rifle's sound signature. He added internal baffles, cutting them carefully from another ration tin, shaping them to enhance the directional confusion. Multiple angles of reflection, multiple false points of origin. At 02:45 hours, the modification was complete. Danny needed to test fire it, but gunshots would alert everyone. He found a snowbank that would muffle the sound, pointed the rifle into it at an angle that would suppress noise further. 8 shots in 2.7 seconds. The trigger performed flawlessly. Reset after reset, smooth and immediate. The echo deflector created a sound that seemed to come from 3 different locations at once. Eddie's whisper was almost reverent. "That's not a Garand anymore. That's a machine gun." Danny's response was quiet but absolute. "It's what Bobby, Jimmy, and Frank needed to be." The watch spring, the pocket watch from his childhood, age 10, taking apart his father's most prized possession, improving it, proving that sometimes the way things are isn't the way things should be. That modification had started everything. Had revealed Danny's gift and his curse, the inability to see broken things and not fix them. Now, 14 years later, another watch spring, another modification, another improvement that would save lives and destroy his own. Eddie noticed the parallel. "Your father's watch. You were 10 years old. This watch spring, same thing." "Same thing," Danny agreed. Father said the army would love me or hate me. Probably both. He was right. In 6 hours, German artillery would open fire. In 7 hours, 180 German infantry would advance on Bobby, Jimmy, and Frank's positions. And Danny would have exactly 47 minutes to do the impossible. 47 minutes to prove that one sergeant with 75 cents worth of salvaged parts could stop a German armored assault. December 23rd, 04:30 hours, pre-dawn darkness. Danny lay at the edge of the foxhole scope pressed to his eye, watching the American forward positions. He could see them despite the darkness. Thermal signature, movement, the small differences that trained eyes learn to detect. Bobby Chen's foxhole, grid position, Baker 7 Charlie, 1,150 yards distant. Even through darkness, Danny recognized Bobby's posture. Hunched over something, shoulders curved protectively. Writing, always writing. Letter number 52 by now probably. Dear Mom and Dad, the war will be over soon. I'll be home by spring. Bobby was 19 years old, 6 months out of high school. He had enlisted the day after graduation because someone has to stop the Nazis. Noble words, young words, the kind of words that get you killed in frozen Belgian forests. Danny watched Bobby fold the letter carefully, place it back in his jacket pocket. Bobby checked his rifle, adjusted his helmet, settled into position to wait for dawn, wait for death. Danny thought, in 20 minutes, German artillery will target that foxhole. Bobby will have maybe 45 seconds to relocate before the first shell impacts. If he's wounded, pinned, confused, or just unlucky, he dies. Annie and Rose Breslin all over again. Different names, same tragedy. 2 parents in San Francisco getting a telegram. We regret to inform you. Jimmy Patterson's position. Grid Baker 8 Alpha, 950 yards distant. Jimmy crouched near the company aid station, a partially collapsed barn that provided minimal shelter. Danny watched him check his medical supplies by shielded flashlight. The movement was obsessive repetitive, counting and recounting. 1 morphine syringe, 3 wounded men. The mathematics of suffering. Through the scope, Danny could see Jimmy's face. Drawn, exhausted. 12 soldiers had died in the past week. 3 from wounds that better supplies could have treated. Jimmy blamed himself for every death. Carried them like physical weight. Danny thought the German assault will create casualties immediately. Mass casualties. Without morphine, soldiers will scream. Screaming reveals positions. More Germans target the noise. More soldiers die. Jimmy will blame himself for every single death, like I blame myself for Tommy. The guilt that never leaves. Frank Mitchell's forward observer post. Grid Baker 6 Delta, 1,300 yards distant. Frank occupied a shallow trench radio equipment around him, antenna extended. He was checking the equipment, making sure everything functioned in the extreme cold. Then he pulled the photograph from inside his jacket. Even at 1,300 yards, Danny knew what it showed. Catherine Mitchell, 8 months pregnant, hand on her belly, smiling at the camera. Due date February 12, 1945, 51 days from now. Danny watched Frank kiss the photograph, watched him hold it for a long moment before tucking it back against his heart. Frank had talked last night about baby names. William for a boy, Catherine Jr. for a girl. Plans for after the war, teaching his son to play baseball, teaching his daughter to read. Normal dreams, impossible dreams. Danny thought Frank's observer post will be priority target number 1. Germans will try to eliminate him, first blind the American artillery. Standard counter-battery doctrine. Once they identify his position, his expected survival time is 6 minutes. 6 minutes before high explosive shells turn his trench into a crater. Catherine becomes a widow. The baby grows up without a father. Another family destroyed. 3 faces, 3 specific human beings. Bobby with his letters, Jimmy with his guilt, Frank with his countdown to fatherhood. They made the abstract mathematics real. 300 men was a number, a statistic, bloodless calculation. But 3 men with names, with families, with futures hanging by threads, that was different. That demanded action. Danny whispered into the frozen air, his breath visible. Bobby, Jimmy, Frank, I see you. I won't let you die like Tommy. Eddie overhearing from his position. What? Nothing, just making a promise I hope I can keep. In 90 minutes, Danny would either break that promise or keep it. The difference would be measured in seconds, in yards and trigger pulls, in whether three young men lived to go home or died in Belgian snow. 0600 to 0645 hours. German preparation. Through binoculars, Danny tracked the enemy at the tree line. Methodical, professional, overwhelming. 12 88mm guns positioning for bombardment. Target coordinates obvious, Bobby, Jimmy, and Frank's sections. 24 tanks refueling. 15 Panzer IVs. 6 Panthers. 3 Tigers. Formation suggested three-pronged assault armor, breakthrough supported by infantry. 800 to 900 infantry staging. Worse than intelligence predicted. Feldgrau uniforms barely visible against snow. Veterans from the Eastern Front who understood winter warfare better than the Americans. Most important, the command element. German officers around a vehicle 900 yards distant. Maps spread on hood. Through his scope, Danny identified ranks. 1 Oberst overall commander, 2 majors battalion commanders, 6 Hauptmann's company commanders. Danny's tactical calculation was cold and clear. Eliminate command structure first. Without coordination, superior force becomes disorganized, ineffective, vulnerable. Kill the brain, the body flails uselessly. 0647 hours. The radio crackled. Eagle Nest to all forward observers. Captain Harrison's voice strained but trying to sound confident. German attack imminent. Maintain positions. Do not engage. Conserve ammunition for close defense. Battalion support en route. Over. Danny keyed the radio. Eagle Nest, this is Watchdog 3. Observing 15 tanks, 900 infantry grid, Baker 7. They will reach our forward line in approximately 20 minutes. Over. A pause, then Harrison's voice returned tighter now. Acknowledge Watchdog 3. Continue observation. Help is on the way. Over. Danny and Eddie exchanged glances. Both men recognized the lie immediately. Help was not on the way, not in 20 minutes. Probably not in 20 hours. Patton's Third Army was still fighting through German resistance to the south. The weather prevented air support. They were alone. Danny made his decision. Walsh, I need you to run back to Captain Harrison's position. Tell him our radio took shrapnel. It's non-functional. Tell him we're staying to observe but may need to relocate due to enemy movement. Go now. Private Walsh looked confused. Sergeant, the radio is working fine. Danny's voice was hard, allowing no argument. The radio will be broken as soon as you leave. That's an order, Private. Understanding dawned in Walsh's eyes. He hesitated for only a moment, then nodded. He crawled backward through the communication trench toward the main American line, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. Eddie spoke quietly. You're cutting us off from command, making sure they can't order us to stand down. Danny was already repositioning his rifle, checking his sight picture. When Harrison realizes what we're doing, he'll order us to cease fire immediately. Can't obey orders we don't receive. It was deliberate isolation, calculated disobedience. Danny was severing his connection to the chain of command, making himself unreachable, ensuring that when he opened fire, no one could stop him. Eddie considered for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What's the plan after you saved 300 men and they court-martial you? Die of old age in prison, I guess. Danny's smile was grim. But Bobby, Jimmy, and Frank die of old age at home. Fair trade. 0700 hours. German artillery bombardment began. The opening barrage was devastating. 30 minutes of continuous fire. Shells screaming overhead, the sound rising from low whistle to shrieking roar. Impacts shaking the ground, concussive force crushing lungs even hundreds of yards away. Snow and frozen earth erupting skyward. Trees shattered. Structures collapsed. Danny, Eddie, and Walsh huddled in their foxhole, the log covering providing minimal protection from shrapnel. The noise was beyond deafening. Physical force hammering eardrums. Each nearby explosion felt like being punched in the chest. But through breaks in the bombardment, Danny kept his scope on Bobby, Jimmy, and Frank's positions. 0712 hours. Shell impact 30 yards from Bobby's foxhole. The explosion threw Bobby against the foxhole wall. Danny watched through the scope, breath held, until Bobby moved again. Stunned, but alive. 0719 hours, direct hit on the aid station. The partially collapsed barn took another shell, the structure collapsing further. Smoke and dust obscured everything. Then Danny saw Jimmy emerging from the wreckage, dragging a wounded soldier refusing to abandon anyone. 0724 hours. mortar rounds bracketing Frank's observer post, high explosive shells walking closer with each salvo. But Frank stayed on the radio, calling defensive artillery fires, coordinating counter-battery missions, refusing to abandon his position, even as death closed in. Danny counted seconds. Each one that Bobby, Jimmy, and Frank stayed alive felt like borrowed time, like watching a clock tick down to an execution and being powerless to stop it. Except Danny wasn't powerless. He had 189 rounds of ammunition. He had a modified trigger that could fire twice as fast as any standard rifle. He had an echo deflector that would make the Germans think they faced a platoon instead of one man. And he had 47 minutes to prove it was enough. 0730 hours. The artillery ceased. Eerie silence fell across the battlefield, broken only by the moans of wounded men, the cracking of damaged structures, settling, the creaking of tree branches, heavy with snow. Then came a new sound. Tank engines. Low mechanical growl growing steadily louder. The sound of diesel engines warming up tracks, beginning to move steel, grinding against frozen ground. Danny peered carefully over the foxhole edge. Through the trees, through the morning mist and gun smoke, he saw them. German tanks emerging from the tree line, 850 yards away. Behind them came the infantry in disciplined formations, using the tanks for cover, moving with the confidence of veterans who believed they were about to win. Eddie's voice was barely a whisper. This is it. Danny positioned his rifle on the fallen log, the wood providing both support and concealment. He attached the echo deflector to the muzzle, the cone-shaped tin fitting snugly. He checked the chamber. Round loaded, safety off. Through his scope, he found his first target, the German Oberst, the colonel commanding the entire assault. Standing in the turret of the lead Panzer tank, binoculars raised to his face, surveying the American lines with the confidence of a man who believed he was beyond rifle range. Range 847 yards. Danny checked his watch, 0732 hours. He thought of Tommy Breslin, of Annie and Rose, who would never know their father. He thought of Bobby Chen writing letter number 52, of Jimmy Patterson rationing his last morphine syringe, of Frank Mitchell counting down 51 days to fatherhood. Danny whispered into the frozen morning air, God forgive me. And then his finger touched the trigger, and the impossible began. The next 47 minutes would determine whether 300 men lived or died. Danny had 189 rounds, one modified trigger, and zero room for error. His finger moved. The modified trigger broke clean at 3 pounds of pressure. The rifle cracked. What happened in those first 90 seconds had already been set in motion at 0732 hours. The impossible rate of fire. The echo effect creating phantom shooters. German officers dropping before they understood the threat. Radio communications severed. Command structure shattered. 9 shots, 9 kills, 47 seconds. The German advance that should have crushed the American line in 20 minutes had instead stalled at 850 yards, confusion spreading through their ranks like poison. Eddie lowered his binoculars, his voice shaking with something between awe and terror. Jesus Christ, clockwork. They think they're facing an entire machine gun platoon. Maybe more. The German tanks were already withdrawing to the tree line. Tactical retreat, regroup, reassess. One sergeant with a 75-cent modification had just stopped a German armored assault. Progress report running through Danny's mind like a mantra, 9 down. Approximately 20 command and support targets remaining. 180 rounds left. Bobby, Jimmy, Frank still alive. But Danny's success was creating a deadly problem. At the German tree line, he could see soldiers with distinctive uniform markings examining the ground where his bullets had struck. Feldgendarmerie, military police trained in battlefield forensics. They were tracking his shots, calculating angles, determining his position. Eddie saw them too. They're figuring us out. We need to move. After the next burst. But the Feldgendarmerie were professionals. They worked fast. Within 3 minutes, they had calculated the approximate source of fire. German artillery crews began adjusting their guns. We move now. Eddie grabbed Danny's shoulder. They gathered equipment rapidly, leaving nothing behind that would confirm their exact position. As they crawled away from the foxhole toward a secondary position, 300 yards southeast, the first German artillery shells began falling. Not general bombardment, precise fire, targeting their exact former location. The foxhole they had just abandoned disappeared in a fountain of frozen earth and shattered wood. The Germans had found them. They just found them 3 minutes too late. For the next 2 hours, Danny and Eddie executed a careful pattern: shoot and move. Fire from a position for no more than 5 minutes, just long enough to disrupt German reorganization attempts, but never long enough for the Feldgendarmerie to calculate location and direct accurate artillery fire. The Germans made 3 separate attempts to advance during those 2 hours. Each time, Danny's accurate fire from unexpected directions forced them back. Each time, the Germans believed they faced multiple American machine gun positions. Platoon strength, maybe company strength, coordinated defense in depth. The reality was one sergeant with a dying trigger mechanism and one spotter with binoculars. Position 20825 hours, 400 yards southeast of original location. German infantry attempting flanking movement. Danny engaged. 7 shots intended as rapid burst. But the trigger stuck after the 5th shot. He had to manually cycle it with his knife point, precious seconds lost. Still 4 Germans down. The flanking attempt collapsed. Progress update: 15 Germans eliminated total. Trigger beginning to fail. 174 rounds remaining. Position 3, 47 hours, 600 yards southwest. German artillery observers trying to direct counter-battery fire against American positions. 3 observers standing in the open, confident they were beyond rifle range. Danny eliminated all 3 before they could transmit coordinates. Trigger stuck twice. Manual reset both times. Position 40919 hours. Elevated position in an abandoned farmhouse, 2nd floor, best overview of the entire sector. German anti-tank teams setting up to target American positions. Danny engaged. Attempted rapid 3-shot burst. Trigger completely seized after the 2nd shot. Danny frantically worked the action manually. Cleared the mechanism. 3rd shot, 4th shot, 5th shot. All 3 crew members down before they could fire. But it had taken precious seconds. Seconds that could mean death in combat. The modified trigger was dying. The watch spring was fatiguing. The filed surfaces were wearing. The extreme cold was affecting the metal properties. What had been instantaneous reset was now intermittent function. 2 shots, then failure. 3 shots, then manual cycling required. Eddie watched Danny struggle with the mechanism. "Your rifle's dying clockwork." Danny manually reset the trigger again, testing it dry. "Just needs to last until Patton gets here." "How long is that?" Danny looked through his scope toward Bobby, Jimmy, and Frank's positions. All 3 were still visible. Still moving. Still breathing. Still alive. Don't know, but they're still breathing. That's what matters. Progress update: 28 Germans eliminated total. 3 German advance attempts disrupted. Trigger functional only for single shots or very short bursts before manual reset required. 157 rounds remaining. Bobby, Jimmy, Frank's sections still intact. Physical condition: Danny's right shoulder was now one massive bruise, purple-black, spreading across his entire upper back. Each shot sent sharp pain through damaged muscle. His trigger finger was bleeding freely, blood freezing to the metal, making it difficult to feel the trigger properly. His hands were numb despite gloves' manual dexterity seriously compromised. And the rifle that had saved dozens of lives was slowly, inevitably failing. But Danny had bought 2 hours. 2 hours for Captain Harrison to reposition forces. 2 hours for American defenders to improve positions. 2 hours for ammunition to be redistributed. 2 hours closer to Patton's arrival. 2 hours that Bobby, Jimmy, and Frank used to stay alive. December 24th, 05:15 hours. Christmas Eve dawn. The expected German counterattack came with first light. Maximum commitment. 37 tanks. Over 1,000 infantry. Concentrated on a 2-mile front. Everything the Germans could spare thrown at the weakest point in Bastogne's perimeter. The artillery preparation was the heaviest yet. 45 minutes of continuous bombardment. The ground shook. The sky turned gray with smoke. Structures that had survived previous attacks were finally destroyed. The noise was beyond comprehension. Physical force that made breathing difficult made thinking impossible. But the American defenses were different now. The time Danny had bought had been used well. Additional 50 caliber machine guns repositioned for overlapping fields of fire. Ammunition redistributed to ensure maximum coverage. Anti-tank teams positioned at likely approach routes. Morale boosted by confirmed news that Patton's forces were fighting their way closer. Hope. That's what Danny had bought. Not just time, but hope. Danny and Eddie were now positioned in the second-story room of another abandoned farmhouse, 400 yards behind the forward American line. The elevated position gave exceptional fields of fire across the entire northwest approach. Perfect sniper position. Also perfect target once the Germans identified it. With them, David Walsh had returned carrying additional ammunition and serving as radio operator and ammunition handler. Captain Harrison's orders delivered via Walsh. Target officers, radio operators, anti-tank teams make every shot count. And Harlow, I don't know what you did yesterday, but do it again. Unofficial acknowledgement. Unofficial approval. As long as it worked, command would look the other way. Danny's modified trigger was now barely functional. Single shots only with manual reset required after each one. The rapid-fire capability that had made everything possible was gone. The rifle was essentially reduced to bolt-action function. But Danny's skill went beyond the modification. The trigger had been a tool, a force multiplier. But the fundamental ability, the mechanical understanding, the intuitive grasp of angles and trajectories and timing, that was all Danny. He would prove it. 0600 hours. The German attack began. Tanks advanced in wedge formations, main guns firing at suspected American positions. Behind them, waves of infantry using the armor for cover, moving with the disciplined confidence of veterans. The American defenders held fire until the Germans reached 300 yards. Then they unleashed everything. Machine guns swept the exposed infantry. Bazooka teams targeted the lead tanks. Mortar rounds fell among the German formations. The noise was apocalyptic. In this chaos, Danny's rifle still proved devastatingly effective. Not through rate of fire anymore. Through precision, through target selection, through knowing exactly which German to kill to create maximum disruption. 0622 hours. Bobby Chen's crisis. Through his scope, Danny watched Bobby's foxhole take a near miss from a tank round. The explosion threw Bobby from his position, stunned, exposed in the open. German infantry 150 yards away saw the opportunity. They began advancing on his position. Danny engaged. Attempted rapid fire. Trigger stuck completely after second shot. He had to manually cycle the bolt chamber. A new round reset the trigger with his knife. Third shot. Fourth shot. Manual cycle. Fifth shot. 4 Germans down. Not the rapid burst he wanted, not fast enough, but enough to make the survivors take cover. Bought Bobby 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. Bobby scrambled back to his foxhole, dazed but alive. Danny whispered into the smoke and noise, "Stay down, Bobby. Stay alive." Progress update, Bobby safe. Trigger non-functional for rapid fire. 36 rounds remaining from this magazine. 121 rounds total remaining. 0647 hours. Jimmy Patterson's nightmare. The aid station took a direct hit. The barn structure collapsed almost completely. Through his scope, Danny saw Jimmy dragging a wounded soldier from the wreckage, refusing to leave anyone behind. But German infantry was moving toward the position. And a German sniper team was setting up 400 yards from Jimmy's location. Danny couldn't risk a shot at the sniper team. Too close to American positions. Risk of hitting friendlies too high. Instead, he targeted the German officers directing infantry toward the aid station. 3 officers, 3 separate manual bolt cycles, 3 separate trigger resets with his knife. Slow, methodical, each second feeling like an eternity. 3 Germans down. The infantry advance faltered, lost coordination without officers directing movement. Jimmy got the wounded soldier to safety. Progress update, Jimmy safe. 29 rounds remaining this magazine. Trigger requiring full manual operation each shot. 07-118 hours. Frank Mitchell's desperate stand. Frank's forward observer post was taking concentrated fire. The Germans had identified him as the artillery spotter, the coordinator of American indirect fire. They were trying to eliminate him, blind the American artillery standard counter-battery doctrine. Through his scope, Danny watched Frank's position take machine gun fire, mortar rounds, even direct fire from a tank. But Frank stayed on his radio, continued calling, fire missions, refused to abandon his position. A true soldier, a good man, a father who had 51 days to survive. A German anti-tank team positioned to fire directly at Frank's trench. They were loading the weapon, preparing to fire. Frank would die in the next 10 seconds. Danny engaged the anti-tank crew, attempted rapid burst one final time. Trigger fired one shot, then completely seized. No amount of manipulation would free it. The mechanism had finally failed completely. Danny dropped the rifle, drew his sidearm, a Colt 1911 pistol, 7 rounds effective, range maybe 50 yards. The German anti-tank crew was over 300 yards away. Impossible shot with a pistol. But then Walsh handed him another rifle, a standard M1 Garand from a wounded soldier. No modifications, standard trigger. But functional. Danny grabbed it, acquired target fired. Manual bolt action on a semi-automatic rifle felt wrong, inefficient. But it worked. 3 shots, 3 manual cycles, 3 trigger pulls that felt sluggish after days with his modified weapon. The German anti-tank crew went down. All 3. The weapon unfired. Frank continued his radio mission, unaware how close death had come. Progress update, Frank safe. Modified rifle dead. Fighting with standard equipment. Proving skill beyond the tool. The battle raged for 4 more hours. Danny continued engaging targets, methodically conserving ammunition, making every shot count. The rapid-fire capability was gone. The echo deflector was gone, abandoned with his original rifle. But the fundamental skill remained. By 1,000 hours, the German assault began to falter. Losses were too heavy. 14 tanks destroyed. Estimated 300 casualties. The American line remained intact. Battered. Bleeding. But intact. And then the weather changed. 11 and 30 hours. The clouds parted. After days of overcast skies, heavy snow and fog, the weather broke suddenly. The sky turned brilliant blue. Sunlight reflected off snow, almost blinding after so much gray. And with the clear skies came sound. Aircraft engines, growing louder. American severed transport planes appeared flying low over Bastogne. Parachutes blossomed, hundreds of them, colorful against the blue sky. Supply drops, ammunition, medical equipment, winter clothing, food. The psychological effect was electric. The defenders weren't forgotten. The rest of the army was fighting to reach them. Relief was coming. They just had to hold a little longer. The effect on the Germans was opposite. Air superiority was shifting. Patton's forces were confirmed approaching from the south. The window for breakthrough was closing. Time was running out. By 1400 hours, German pressure on the northwest sector decreased noticeably. The main effort was shifting to different approaches, trying to find a weakness elsewhere. Danny's sector had held. Bobby, Jimmy, and Frank's section had held. 0 breakthrough. The German timetable was shattered. 1445 hours. A moment of recognition. During a lull in fighting, Danny observed through his scope. Bobby Chen was standing in his foxhole facing toward Danny's farmhouse position. Bobby was waving, grinning, giving a thumbs up. Eddie, watching through binoculars, spoke quietly. "Clockwork Bobby sees us. He's waving." Danny focused his scope on Bobby's face. The young soldier from San Francisco who wrote letter number 52 just yesterday. Alive, uninjured, smiling. Jimmy Patterson was at the aid station, tending wounded, organizing medical supplies from the airdrop. Working steadily, competently, saving lives. Frank Mitchell was in his observer post on his radio, adjusting artillery fires against retreating German forces. 51 days until fatherhood. 51 days he was going to reach. Danny felt something break inside his chest. Emotion forcing its way through the battlefield numbness. The iron discipline that kept soldiers functional during combat cracking just slightly. These 3 men were alive. The promise was kept. Eddie saw Danny's expression. "You did it, clockwork. You saved them." Danny's voice was rough. "We're not done yet." But he thought, "Tommy, I kept the promise. No more Annie and Rose Breslins. Not today. Not these 3. Bobby will go home to his parents. Jimmy will practice medicine and save thousands more. Frank will meet his daughter, walk her down the aisle someday, because of a watch spring and a 75-cent modification. But what came next would be court-martial. 3 hours later, Danny would face the choice between recognition and punishment, between medals and firing squad. December 26, 1944, 1347 hours. The radio erupted with excited chatter. Multiple voices overlapping, shouting, cheering. "Contact friendly armor southern perimeter. 3rd Army Patton's here." They broke through. The first elements of Patton's 4th Armored Division had smashed through the German encirclement. Tanks rolled into Bastogne, their crews grinning, waving. The siege was over. American defenders poured from their positions. Soldiers embracing, men crying openly. The relief wasn't just physical, it was psychological. They had held. Against impossible odds they had held. The Battle of the Bulge would continue for another month, but Bastogne was secure. The critical road junction remained in American hands. Hitler's last great gamble in the West had failed. December 27th, 0830 hours. The reckoning. Captain William Harrison appeared at Danny's position. His face was unreadable. "Sergeant Harlow, you're coming with me." The command tent was warm heated by a small stove. Inside, Harrison Major Reynolds Colonel Sanders. Danny's modified M1 Garand lay on a table disassembled, the echo deflector beside it. Evidence. Danny stood at attention, still dirty from 3 days of combat, hands shaking slightly from exhaustion and cold. His shoulder screamed with pain. His trigger finger was bandaged now, but blood was seeping through. Colonel Sanders studied him for a long moment and then spoke. "Sit down, Sergeant." Danny sat. Sanders picked up the trigger assembly, examined it closely. "Do you know what you did?" "Yes, sir." Silence. 10 seconds that felt like hours. "Enlighten me." Danny kept his voice steady. "Engaged enemy forces using modified equipment. Disobeyed direct orders to maintain observation only. Operated independently without authorization." "Sir." Major Reynolds opened a manual, read formally. Article 108 UCMJ, Destruction of Government Property. Article 92, Failure to obey lawful orders. Maximum penalty, 5 years hard labor. In combat zone with unauthorized weapon modification, firing squad is authorized. More silence. Longer this time. 15 seconds. Sanders set down the trigger assembly. "How many are?" "Engaged 28 confirmed enemy casualties over 3-day period, sir. Disrupted multiple German advances." An intelligence officer, Captain Martinez, spoke up. "Without Sergeant Harlow's actions, intelligence estimates 180 American casualties in Northwest Sector alone, possibly leading to perimeter collapse and loss of Bastogne." Sanders picked up the echo deflector, examined it. "You built this from?" "Salvaged ration tins, sir, filed and shaped, cost approximately nothing." Sanders stared at the device, then at the modified trigger, then at Danny. His expression was complex. Anger, admiration, frustration, respect all mixed together. "If I give you the Silver Star, I condone disobeying direct orders. Every soldier in this division will think they can modify equipment and ignore commands. Discipline collapses. If I court-martial you, I punish a man who saved 180 lives minimum, possibly 300, possibly the entire garrison. If word gets out that a 75-cent modification outperforms millions of dollars in official equipment development, the Ordnance Department will have my head." Pause. 8 seconds. "What the hell am I supposed to do with you, Sergeant?" Danny met his eyes directly. "Private Thomas Breslin had 2 daughters, sir, Annie and Rose, ages 6 and 4. Tommy died June 6 because his rifle jammed, equipment failure, standard malfunction. I decided that day no more families get letters because equipment works fine but doesn't work well enough. Sir, if that means court-martial, I accept it. But I don't regret saving Private Chen, Corporal Patterson, and Lieutenant Mitchell." The longest pause yet. 12 seconds. Sanders looked at Harrison, at Reynolds, at the ceiling, making a decision that would affect doctrine, policy, precedent. Finally, he spoke. "Captain Harrison, get me your best machinist. Every designated marksman in this division will have one of these devices within 48 hours. Sergeant Harlow will teach the armorers how to build them." Danny blinked. "Sir, you're promoted to Staff Sergeant. You'll receive Bronze Star for actions December 23rd and 24th. Not Silver Star because officially this never happened. Your modification will be classified. You will never speak of it publicly. In return, no court-martial. Clear?" "Yes, sir." Sanders allowed himself a slight smile. "Next time you decide to save 300 men by violating every regulation in the book, Sergeant, tell me before you do it. My heart can't take these surprises." Within 48 hours, 8 copies were built. All battalion snipers equipped. Within 1 week, 47 devices existed throughout the division. The modifications spread like wildfire. Soldiers teaching soldiers. Unofficial technical manual passed hand to hand. Captured German reports later revealed their confusion. New American long-range weapon system. Recommend withdrawal to 1,000 meters minimum. The Germans thought it was official engineered expensive. Actually 75 cents and one stubborn sergeant. By war's end in May 1945, over 2,000 devices in circulation. Conservative estimate, 3,000 to 5,000 American lives saved. Total material cost, $1,500. Equivalent official procurement program would have cost $4.7 million and taken 2 years of development. Danny was offered a permanent position as technical specialist. He declined. Like thousands of American soldiers, he just wanted to go home. October 1945, honorably discharged, ranked technical sergeant, service record, exceptional technical skills and combat performance. Danny returned to Ashford, Ohio, used the GI Bill to study mechanical engineering in Columbus, opened a machine shop in 1948, Harlow Precision Works, specializing in agricultural equipment parts. The business prospered. He married Helen Simmons in 1949, a school teacher. 3 children, Daniel Jr., Robert, Sarah. For 30 years, Danny never spoke about the war. His family knew he served with the 101st Airborne at Bastogne, nothing else. He preferred the present to the past, the future to memory. He died in 1989, age 68, from emphysema after working in steel mills following his retirement. His obituary was 3 paragraphs. Served with distinction in World War II. No mention of modifications. No mention of lives saved. No mention of 300 men who went home because of 75 cents in a watch spring, 1994, 5 years after his death. Military historian Dr. Sarah Chen was researching the Battle of the Bulge. She found a pattern in declassified after-action reports. The northwest sector of Bastogne held against impossible odds. References to technical consultation by a Sergeant Harlow. Mentions of unusual German confusion about American capabilities. Dr. Chen tracked Danny's widow Helen. Found a footlocker in the attic. Inside, Danny's modified M1 Garand carefully preserved. Documentation. And a letter from Colonel Sanders written in 1969 after his retirement, promoted to general. Your husband saved thousands of lives. He deserved the Medal of Honor. Military politics prevented recognition during his lifetime. He was the best soldier I ever commanded. The nation owes him a debt it never repaid. Dr. Chen published her findings in 2003. The 75-cent War, How One Sergeant's Forbidden Modification Changed Combat Forever. The book created renewed interest. The Marine Corps Museum at Quantico requested Danny's rifle for display. Helen Harlow donated it along with all documentation. 2003 exhibit opening, Danny's modified Garand behind glass. Plaques explaining the technical details, the historical impact, the lives saved. Bronze star displayed. And a silver star awarded posthumously 59 years late. Better late than never, the citation read, though everyone knew it wasn't true. It was too late. Too late by decades. But Bobby Chen attended that opening. 79 years old now, retired high school teacher from San Francisco. He brought his daughter Annie, named after the girl Danny had saved from becoming fatherless. Bobby stood before the display for a long time, read every word, examined the modified trigger mechanism, understood, finally completely, why he was alive. My father came home, Annie said to the reporter interviewing visitors. I knew him. He taught me to read, walked me down the aisle at my wedding, met my children, his grandchildren. All because of this sergeant I never met using equipment modified for 75 cents. I wish I could have thanked him. Jimmy Patterson had died in 2001, age 79. But his son attended. Jimmy had become a country doctor in Tennessee after the war. 40 years of practice. Saved thousands of lives. Carried morphine in his bag, always never rationed, never ran short. The trauma of Bastogne turned into a lifetime of healing. Frank Mitchell, age 87, was there in person. Walked slowly, leaning on a cane, but there. His daughter Catherine, named after her mother, pushed his wheelchair part of the way. 6 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren, a family that existed because one sergeant refused to follow orders when lives were at stake. Frank stood before the display with tears running down his weathered face. He saved my life. I met my daughter because of him. Everything I have, everyone I love exists because Sergeant Harlow broke regulations. Sometimes doing what's right means disobeying orders. Today, every Army-designated marksman learns Danny's story at Fort Benning. Day one of training, doctrine is a starting point, not a finish line. In 1944, one sergeant with 75 cents of salvaged materials outperformed millions of dollars in engineering because he saw what equipment should be, not just what it was. Learn from that. The Scout Sniper School's Room 4 is named the Harlow Innovation Lab, a reminder that sometimes the best solutions come from sergeants with needle files, not engineers with slide rules. December 23, 1944, 08:19 hours, returned to that moment one final time. Danny lowered his rifle after the ninth shot. German forces were withdrawing to the tree line. Through his scope, he could see Bobby Chen in his foxhole checking his equipment, preparing for whatever came next. Could see Jimmy Patterson at the aid station, organizing supplies. Could see Frank Mitchell in his observer, post-radio handset to his ear. All three alive. All three moving. All three breathing. 0 American casualties in their sector. The German advance stopped. The impossible accomplished. Danny had broken every regulation. Risked court-martial, possibly execution. Violated direct orders from command. Modified government property. Operated independently without authorization. And saved 300 lives. He didn't think about medals. Recognition never entered his mind. He thought about Tommy Breslin's daughters, about Annie and Rose who would never know their father, about 300 families who wouldn't receive telegrams, starting with, "We regret to inform you." The cost permanent disciplinary notation in his service record, lost career advancement, 25 years of enforced silence. Recognition delayed 59 years until long after his death, until it was meaningless to him personally. The Gain Bobby Chen wrote letters home for 60 more years, became a teacher, raised a daughter named Annie in honor of the girl he helped save from fatherlessness. Jimmy Patterson practiced medicine for 4 decades, saved thousands of lives, carried the lessons of Bastogne into a lifetime of healing. Frank Mitchell met his daughter Catherine on February 12, 1904, walked her down the aisle in 1967, lived to see 6 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren, a family tree that exists because of 75 cents, and a sergeant who refused to follow orders. Danny would say it was worth it, every consequence, every cost worth it. Final accounting, 28 enemy eliminated, 300 American lives saved immediately, 3,000 to 5,000 lives saved total throughout the war. Cost 75 cents. Recognition during life, classified Bronze Star. True recognition, 59 years too late. But the lives saved, those were never too late. These stories deserve remembering. Share Sergeant Daniel Harlow's legacy. Remember that heroes don't always follow orders. Sometimes they follow conscience instead. Sometimes doing what's right means breaking every rule. Sometimes 75 cents and a watch spring save more lives than millions of dollars in engineering. Remember the clockwork soldier? Remember that working class genius can outperform credentialed experts. Remember that individual courage can overcome bureaucratic inertia. Remember that 3 specific faces matter more than abstract numbers. Remember Bobby, Jimmy, and Frank. Remember they lived because one man saw what things could be, not just what they were. Remember Daniel Harlow, Sergeant United States Army 101st Airborne Division, 1922 to 1989. Bronze Star, Silver Star, posthumous. Lives saved 3,000 to 5,000. Cost 75 cents. I don't care about regulations. I care about saving lives.